Hello and welcome to Heart Containers, a daily Nintendo podcast where every Monday through Friday we discuss the latest Nintendo news. I'm your host, Rami Fawaz, and this is the episode for Monday, March 11th. I hope you guys had a great weekend, but it's time to come back and talk about what's going on in the world of Nintendo. Today we're going to be discussing Mario Day. That was yesterday, March 10th. We're also going to be talking about Japanese game sales, Octopath Traveler Sequels, Pokemon Sword and Shield gyms, and the viability of a Devil May Cry 5 port for the Nintendo Switch. So let's just get into all of that and more in today's daily Nintendo report.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS. My body is ready.
We would like to play.
A way to make 3D games a reality. And it's called the Wii U Game Pen.
Happy Mario Day, everyone! Yesterday was March 10th, meaning MAR10, or Mario Day as Nintendo likes to call it. As we predicted last week, no major announcements were made, but Nintendo did include some discounts on major Mario Switch titles, including a Switch bundle which came with a half-off game of your choosing. So these games they were including in this bundle included Super Mario Party, Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Mario Tennis Aces, and New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. So of course, the Mario Gambit on the Nintendo Switch at the moment. For those of you who already have a Switch, like me, you can purchase digital download codes from participating retail stores or websites for those same 5 Mario games at a discounted price of $39.99. Now, these deals will actually continue onward until the end of the week, making it more like a Mario week as opposed to Mario Day. That end is Saturday, March 16th, if you want me to be a bit more specific about that. Now, there are also a handful of other promotional Mario Day activities that occurred and or are still occurring as we speak, including a My Nintendo Reward update with new wallpapers and themes and stuff like that, and tie-ins for the mobile titles Super Mario Run and Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. The one thing that interests me the most about all this are the discounts. There's one of these games that I don't currently own. I've only ever played Super Mario Party with friends on other people's Switches. I haven't actually bought the bullet and purchased that game, and this is the right time to do so. Although I'm a little confused about exactly where and how, who are the retailers that are supporting this new lower price point. I went on Amazon, I went on Target, and I looked up the digital downloads for Super Mario Party, and I did not see a discounted price of $39.99. So I'm not quite sure where to go for this information or how to figure out how to purchase this game at a lower price point. I have seen the bundle though. That's something I went onto Target's site to look that up, and I was able to see this deal where you can buy a Nintendo Switch and get a half-off Mario game from one of these games. I just haven't seen the digital download. So if you are interested in any of these type of things, make sure you jump on that before Saturday, March 16th. Speaking of March 16th, I wanted to take a second to let you guys know about the latest Splatfest in Splatoon 2. I know I've mentioned this before, but the Splatoon 2 development team for the game has stated that they will be wrapping up with Splatfest in July of this year. So that means there's really only a handful left to participate in, and on top of that, Splatfests are usually timed events that don't last very long, right? We're talking 1 to 2 days max. So if you want to participate in it, you have to plan for it in advance, or it can easily, kind of slip your mind, especially if you're not really playing Splatoon 2 as regularly as some of the more dedicated Splatoon community members are. Someone like me, I kind of just jump in and jump out when there is something important going on, when I want to get my Splatoon fix. So there is a Splatfest happening this weekend. The Splatfest asks the fantasy lover inside of you to decide if you would rather be a knight or a wizard. So you can either join the knight team or the wizard team this time around. And again, it takes place this Saturday, March 16th. I personally will not be participating in the Splatfest. I probably won't be participating in any Splatfest from this point onward because my Switch broke. That's right, guys. A few weeks ago, I think at this point, my Switch broke and I had to replace it with a brand new Switch. And as you guys might know, Splatoon 2 is one of those games where the online multiplayer component is not savable on the cloud. So even though I have Nintendo Switch Online, I do not get the benefit of saving all of the progress I've made in the multiplayer mode on the cloud, and that has bummed me out tremendously, and I have not felt motivated to go back to that game ever since, because I don't really want to start over from scratch. I made a lot of progress in that game. I got a lot of cool equipment that I can't really, I can't use anymore. I have to start from scratch. So I'm kind of done with Splatoon 2. I will not be participating in the Splatfest, but if I was, I would choose Team Wizard. Wizards are way cooler than Knights, in my opinion. I think Knights are kind of boring because they just kind of, they wear their armor and they're shielded up, while Wizards get the light show, right? They get to do the fun stuff. So I'm going to be rooting for Team Wizard in spirit, but if you actually want to participate, it's this Saturday, March 16th. While we are sort of on the topic of Splatoon 2, the Japanese gaming publication Famitsu celebrated the Switch's second anniversary on their own last week by sharing some facts about the console thus far, including a list of the best-selling Switch games of all time in Japan. And that list was pretty long, but it includes third parties, indies, first parties, everything. And it seems like a pretty comprehensive list, and I wanted to talk about a couple things that I noticed on that list. So the top 5 are Splatoon 2 at number 1, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate number 2, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is at 3, Super Mario Odyssey at 4, and then Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. The one thing that immediately jumps out at me is that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is incredibly high to be at number 2. Remember that that's a game that came out in December. That's just a few months from now. I mean, that's a stone throws away. It's barely been out, and yet it is already climbing so high and being one of the best-selling games for the Switch in Japan. No doubt it's climbing the same ladder in the other regions of the world, but we are specifically looking at these Japanese numbers because that's all we have at this very moment. What is really significant about that to me is if you look at how razor thin the margin is from Splatoon 2 to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Splatoon 2 is sitting at 2.98 million copies sold, while Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is at 2.88 million. That is so insanely close that you would have to guess that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is just a couple months away from catching up, especially when you look into the fact that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is just getting started. Splatoon 2 has had its time to shine. It had an expansion, it had all types of free DLC, Splatfest. We just talked about a Splatfest. It really has had various points in its history to bring more players in, to get more sales, bumps, spikes, whatever you want to call it, while Super Smash Bros. Had that initial push, which, as we've seen across all regions, were pushing insane numbers in terms of total sales, but now it's going to start wave 2. We just found out about the 3.0 update that is going to be coming out this spring with new modes that's supposed to, bring people back into Smash. Not to mention that those 5 characters, starting with Joker from Persona 5, they haven't even begun to starting release those yet. So Smash Brothers is no doubt going to crush Splatoon 2 in the long run. It's going to surpass it easily within the next few months, I would imagine, and then continue to go forward and go forward. The real question is, can Smash maintain it? Can Smash be the number 1 game, not only in Japan, but across all regions? Because if you look at the trajectories, guys, Smash is making its way to the top of every single region's list and best-selling Switch game of all time. Can Smash maintain it throughout the Switch's lifespan? I don't know. I would have said that the games that would most likely beat Smash are Pokemon and Mario Kart, although we already have a Pokemon and a Mario Kart on that list. Granted, they're kind of like asterisked, right? Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a port of the Wii U game, so does that really count as a Mario Kart 9, right? Could Mario Kart 9 dethrone both of those? Who's to tell, right? And Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, many would argue those aren't real Pokemon games, quote unquote, whatever way you want to look at it. That Generation 8, that Pokemon Sword and Shield are going to do way better than Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. My eyes are on that game and Animal Crossing. One of those games might have the potential to surpass Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and beat it in the long run when we're looking at the end of the Switch's lifespan and seeing which game reigns supreme. But it's going to be close, guys. I can't really tell. I mean, I would place my money on Sword and Shield, but if Sword and Shield comes out and does not immediately set the trajectory here of matching Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and potentially doesn't even have as compelling of a DLC plan as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I would not be surprised if we get to the end of this generation and Smash Brothers, of all franchises, a franchise that has never really been able to hold this title, is at number 1 when it's all said and done. Last week, we talked about Kirby's extra epic yarn arriving on the 3DS and how it could be signaling the end for our favorite three-dimensional handheld. Well, according to some early Media Create sales data for the game in Japan, the title only moved 20% of its overall shipment on the first day. That's not a very impressive debut for the game, but one that you would have to assume Nintendo saw coming. This is actually a pattern at this point now with these 3DS games that are coming out near the end of the 3DS's lifespan, I would guess. The last game to come out like this was Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser's Jr., blah, 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 blah. That game came out in January, and it also had a very similar story to Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, being a port of the DS game with added content. That's exactly what Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn is, except it's a port of a Wii game with added extra content. Both of them pushed off their starts with very lackluster beginnings, and at least for Mario and Luigi, it did not have a turnaround point where it really saved itself and ended up becoming one of the worst selling Mario games in Japan in recent history. And I mean, anything with the Mario like subtitle or tagline in it, it is one of the worst ones in recent history. Maybe that's what we're going to see with Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn too. I mean, having a poor start like this is definitely a sign that that might be what's to come. And before that, before Mario and Luigi, we had Luigi's Mansion 3, which released last year as a port without any extra content, at least not that I'm aware of. I actually didn't buy that game, so I guess I'm part of the problem at this point. But even still, whether it did have extra content or not added to that game, it also did not sell well according to the data we've seen from Nintendo. So this is a pattern at this point. Time and time again, these ports that are coming out for the 3DS are not selling very well. Does Nintendo expect to sell that well? I would say they do, just because of what they said at that last financial call, where they talked about how they expected the 3DS to kind of last a little bit longer. They didn't expect the Steam to run out as soon as it appears to. And where else are you going to get that data between, except for hardware and software numbers? These are the numbers I'm sure Nintendo is looking at. I mean, this is like the only game. Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn was like the only game they had to talk about. And now that it's out, they have nothing left. So how can Nintendo fix this problem at this point onward? Well, there are really two main ways you can go. You either have to put more resources on the 3DS if you believe that the 3DS can continue to thrive. I'm not saying that that's what I believe, but if Nintendo continues to push the 3DS and say that the 3DS should live on side by side with the Switch, well, now you kind of have to put more resources on it if you want to see a different result, because these ports are not working. They can't keep on going low effort, taking a port from the last couple generations, bringing it over to 3DS and expect different results at this point. Because again, 3 is a pattern. They're going to have to start making actual new games for the 3DS if they want to get people interested in that console. But I feel like the more likely option is that, yes, this is the end for the 3DS. They're going to retire that system. They're going to stop even trying at some point, potentially at 2019, in somewhere in the year where they're going to say, hey, the 3DS, we're done making games for that console. That's what I would assume would happen at this point, because I mean, even these ports, which probably aren't that much effort compared to a whole new game, they're not really doing much. They're not moving the needle as much as Nintendo probably would hope for them to move. And at this point in time, you probably are better off, and you probably make a lot more money putting these same exact games on the Switch. Even if it's just a marginal increase, it's still better off. Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn being a Switch port would probably make Nintendo a lot more money on the Switch than the 3DS, even though the 3DS has the way bigger user base. It's just because people aren't interested, not nearly as much, in the 3DS. And even the younger consumer base that can afford a 3DS, I think at this point they're kind of anxiously waiting for the Switch to kind of fall into a price category that they can actually afford it and then play games on their Switch. I don't know how many people are going out there and buying 3DSs in this day and age. Square Enix's Switch exclusive JRPG Octopath Traveler released in the summer of last year and has made the company a pretty penny, it seems. Square revealed this past weekend that the game shifted 1.5 million copies, a number that has encouraged them to push the franchise forward in multiple ways that you would hope fans of the series would be excited for. Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent was announced as a prequel for the game, arriving for, wait for it, mobile devices later this year. A demo for the mobile title will be arriving shortly, and you can watch the trailer for Champions of the Continent right now. It looks surprisingly close to the original game in terms of second-to-second gameplay. Honestly, when I watched the trailer, if someone would have just told me this was a portion of the original Octopath Traveler, I would have believed them. That's how close this mobile game looks like to the actual original game. Now, for anyone concerned about the future of Octopath Traveler on Nintendo Switch or on home consoles in general, Square also tried to calm our fears by stating that a new console game is currently in the works, but they apologize for not having anything to show at the moment because it needs more time in production. In the meantime, they hope we will enjoy Champions of the Continent, that's what it's called, for iOS and Android devices coming out later this year. So I remember when Octopath Traveler released last year in the summer, it got a lot of praise. People really liked that game. Did it have was it perfect, right? Did it have some problems? Absolutely it had some problems. I remember people saying that there were some polish issues that needed to be fixed. The story was a pain point for many, including myself. The fact that you can have 8 main characters, but there's not really one overarching narrative to build into with Octopath Traveler. People kept waiting for it all to weave together into like this symphony of story where it tells this grandiose tale of 8 characters coming together to solve some big problem or something like that, and all the lives kind of weave in a natural way. That didn't happen. So there were definitely some problems with Octopath Traveler, but it was a great start. It was such a healthy, refreshing game to be joining the Switch's library, and I think more people thought that it was a positive experience than negative. For sure, I'm glad that it's an exclusive Switch title, and I'm glad that Square decided to take that risk on the Switch and release their own franchise. To me, because of all of those things, 1.5 million is a success. I don't think JRPGs are as popular as they used to be. I mean, I could be talking out of my butt when I say that, but I don't think that's the case, especially when it looks very much like an old school JRPG, which Octopath Traveler on the surface, besides how pretty the aesthetic looks, it does kind of look and play, to give it credit, like an old school JRPG. It's also a brand new franchise. It's something that people don't necessarily recognize, and it's a game that wasn't perfect, right? It had its flaws. So if you take all of that together, 1.5 million, I think that's great. I think that's a fantastic start. It reminds me of perhaps like Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2, where Assassin's Creed 1, it kind of nailed the vision where you played that game and you're like, oh, I see what they're going for, and this is really cool. And when you got Assassin's Creed 2, you kind of saw that and said, oh, okay, this is the perfection of the vision almost. Like, this is the execution where they polished it. They cut off all the corners. It's inoffensive. It's there. They really took it, and you can see what they were going for in the first one, but the execution was there in the second one. And when I look at Octopath Traveler 1, that's exactly what I feel like. You can see what they were going for. And I think 1.5 million is definitely a success that you kind of take to the bank and say, okay, let's make a sequel now. And let's make it the Assassin's Creed 2 of Octopath Traveler. Let's make a sequel that really goes for it and nails in the execution all of the complaints that people had for this game. Let's bring it forward. The real question is, does Square Enix think 1.5 million is a success? Are they satisfied with this number? Honestly, that roller coaster of an announcement of saying, hey, we're happy with these sales. Well, technically it didn't say we're happy with the sales, but hey, here's a big number that, or at least it looks pretty big. And by the way, Octopath Traveler is coming to mobile. Oh man. Oh, but it's coming to also to Nintendo Switch. Oh, good. I mean, that was a roller coaster of emotions for me. It kind of made me question, is Square really satisfied with it? I mean, is bringing a franchise that was exclusive to exclusive to the Nintendo Switch onto mobile, saying that they are satisfied with what they're going for? I think you can look at it in multiple ways, really. I think you can say that maybe they were so excited by the response to Octopath Traveler that they wanted to kind of spread out the franchise. They wanted to get the brand out there in multiple ways, and so they decided to make the mobile port. Or on the flip side, maybe they have their hands tied by Nintendo to an extent with this game, because if you remember, Nintendo published Octopath Traveler in the US. Nintendo has stake in this game. There's a reason why this is an exclusive on Nintendo's platform. And maybe one of the only things that Square can do with this franchise is bring it to mobile. Maybe they can't bring it to PS4 or Xbox One. We're not in those conversations. I don't know the details about this partnership between Nintendo and Square. Who knows if they're satisfied with it? It's just curious that they want to bring this game to mobile, especially a game that looks and plays very similarly to Octopath Traveler on the Switch. I wonder why they wouldn't want to also release it as like a smaller eShop title on the Switch if it does play this close, if it doesn't look so similar. But I digress. When do I think we'll hear more about a full sequel? I hope that they take their time with it because of all the things I mentioned earlier. I really want to see that generational jump. I want Octopath Traveler 2 to kind of be a big deal, to really fix all the problems from the original game and say, this is what we were going for. This is the true execution of our vision, and you should care about it, because in my opinion, that's what's going to solidify this Octopath Traveler franchise as a new and important brand for Square Enix. It's by nailing that second time around. And if instead they kind of don't take their time with it and release a 1.5 version that has a lot of the problems of the original, I think that's the path to making something that becomes forgettable. It wasn't too long ago that we first learned more about the upcoming Pokemon titles expected to arrive later this year, Pokemon Sword and Shield. Since then, new information has been incredibly scarce. That was, of course, until Nintendo of America themselves tweeted out what appeared to be an innocuous confirmation that gyms were making a return in the latest Pokemon installment. Now, gyms and gym leaders have been part of Pokemon since the very beginning, when you walked in and fought Brock as the very first gym leader in the very first gym that you could walk into in the original Pokemon Red and Blue. So this is kind of a return to form, if true. Now, this tweet, it no longer exists because they immediately took it down when they realized their mistake. Apparently, it's still not the appropriate time to learn more about these new titles. Thankfully, other Twitter users managed to get screenshots of the forbidden tweet, which read as follows. It appears in hashtag Pokemon Sword Shield that gyms in the Galar region are now bigger than ever. What types of gym masters are waiting for you to challenge them? You and your new partner Pokemon will have to train hard and find out. The tweet also sported two screenshots that were pulled from the original reveal trailer, one of the outside of a massive oval stadium, which we can now likely assume is confirmed to be a gym. The other is of the trainer walking into a stadium wearing what looks like a soccer uniform. Again, both of these images were actually part of the original reveal trailer, so there wasn't that much new to visually see. First question that comes to my mind is, why the heck would they take it down? even if this was a mistake. If you look at the tweet itself, I mean, I just read it to you. First of all, the images are things that we've already seen before. It's really just the words in the tweet, and they don't say anything that rocks the boat in any major revelation or anything like that. It seems so innocent of a tweet that, hey, gyms are back and they're going to be gym masters. I mean, what did we already know? Or what could we have assumed that we're finding out here? It's like, okay, we already kind of assumed that gyms were going to be a part of it. And if they weren't going to be called gyms, they were probably still going to act kind of like gyms in that way. I mean, if you looked at the trailer or you read about any analysis that happened after the trailer released, you would have also known that there were these big oval stadiums in almost every single region on the Galar map, and people expected those to be a gym type of scenario because, again, that fits in the Pokemon, thematic universe of how Pokemon games work. Gym masters, calling them gym masters, that's also, I mean, that's a little bit new. So, I mean, let's talk about what could be looked at this in terms of maybe they accidentally spilled the beans. One of those things is the term gym master that hasn't really been used in a Pokemon game before. Although, again, I don't think that that's big of a deal because that's that big of a deal. Because, yes, it could signify something new and different, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to signify something so uniquely different, so revolutionary that you have to take down a tweet in order to prevent people from thinking about what gym masters mean. It could literally be as simple as, hey, gym masters are synonymous with gym leaders. It just, in this region, and in Galar, we call them gym masters. I think the most interesting part of it is gyms are bigger than ever. Okay, I mean, that's kind of interesting. How do you make a gym bigger? Do you just add more trainers in it. Instead of walking by like 3 trainers before you get to the gym leader, you walk by 15 trainers to get to the gym leader. No, that's probably not what they're going to do. They're probably going to be a little bit more creative with how they expand gyms, and I think that's far more the far most interesting thing about this tweet is thinking about what does it mean to make a gym bigger than ever, more grandiose. How do you take this challenging aspect of bringing your Pokemon, which you just trained up to, take on this gym and I guess this gym master and turn it into a bigger experience? Is it longer? Does it take a long time to kind of complete? Do they evolve, pun intended, the trials from the last game from Sun and Moon and combine them with old school gyms? I mean, they look very much like soccer stadiums. Is there a mini game that you play in this that also involves battling in some way? I don't know. I remember watching part of an analysis video myself where they mentioned that when you go into the gyms or the video footage from the trailer in the gyms themselves, they actually show Pokemon fighting each other, although the trainers are not in sight. Whereas in every single battle you saw throughout the rest of the trailer, the trainers are always there standing behind the Pokemon. Maybe that could play it in some way. Maybe the gyms are kind of lined up with all the Pokemon that you have on a field, kind of like this top-down, like mini football/soccer style game, and they interact with other Pokemon in fun ways. I don't know. The opportunities, the potentials, whatever it could be, they're endless, right? But they're all just in the air. It's all just using my imagination and our collective imagination to figure out what this might be. So it kind of makes me laugh that Nintendo saw this forbidden tweet as being forbidden and taking it down immediately. I wonder if that means, though, that we are supposed to be hearing more about Pokemon as time goes on, because even if this was released at the wrong time, why now? Like, they had to be planning that this tweet would release sometime soon. I can't imagine that it would be a tweet that they released months ahead of time by accident. I mean, this is how social media marketing works for big corporations. Everything is planned, everything is scheduled, everything kind of fits within the grander marketing machine. Don't expect this one tweet just to be because some guy was sitting at his computer saying, hey, you know what's cool? I think I'm going to tweet about Pokemon. And then he tweeted about it and it was like, oh darn, that was a mistake. No, there was some planning behind this tweet. They just got the date wrong. So I don't know. I think as a whole, this is probably no big deal, but for Pokemon fans, they can go in and speculate more and more about what it means that to bring gyms back, what a gym master could be all about, and also how do you make a gym bigger? How do you make a gym bigger? And the last item on the report, the action-adventure hack-and-slash franchise Devil May Cry made a triumphant return last week when the 5th installment arrived for PC, PS4, and Xbox One last week. And as what happens with any third-party title that releases these days, the director of the game was asked whether or not the game could make its way onto the Nintendo Switch at some point in the future. I have some translated quotes from his response. We started the development of Devil May Cry 5 while we didn't have the dev kits for the Switch. Because of that, we concentrated on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC version. He then went on to say, if Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen sells well on Switch, then we might consider porting Devil May Cry 5. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen is a nearly 7-year-old action role-playing game that Capcom also developed and is scheduled to be ported onto the Switch in April of this year. Let me just get my biases out for this story up straight. I don't claim to know anything about these franchises. I've never played a Devil May Cry game. I've never played a Dragon's Dogma game. So take whatever I'm about to say with a grain of salt when it refers to these actual franchises. I don't know much about them. I know that Devil May Cry has a cherished history. I know that people have really strong bonds with those games, and I know the type of games that we're talking about here, but I've never played them. With that being said, I don't like this announcement. I hate it when developers like this or publishers try to put the responsibility of proving the viability of a port or whether or not a console can make money on the voice of the people, on our shoulders. It's not my job to let you know whether or not it's a good idea to release Devil May Cry 5 onto the Nintendo Switch, especially in a kind of a ludicrous way, right? This specific case, I mean, we've heard developers and publishers say things like this in the past. Like, well, I guess if fans want it bad enough, or if fans buy our games enough, then we'll see that there's money to be involved or money to be had, and therefore we'll consider about doing this. But this specific case, it just gets me, is how are you going to connect Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, which is a game that plays differently than Devil May Cry? I mean, when I see Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, I get Skyrim vibes from that game. And when I see Devil May Cry, it looks way more like a Bayonetta or an old school God of War. They look very different. So you're talking about two games that play pretty differently, that very well could be in different genres, that have different fan bases, different brands, different franchises. One being 7 years old, by the way, Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. And you're saying, hey, if Switch owners go out and buy that game, if that sells a lot, that's going to be some sort of metric for whether or not Devil May Cry 5 should come out on the Switch. That's a ridiculous statement. That's a ridiculous statement. Even if Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen does sell millions and millions and millions of copies, which it probably won't, but even if it does, that is no barrier from, like, there's no metric at all to be paying attention to decide whether or not a Devil May Cry game would successfully sell on the Nintendo Switch. Like, how can you say that? These things always gotta get me like riled up in a way that's like, I don't know what these developers and these publishers and whoever it is that are saying comments like this whenever those stories come about. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they want us to do, perhaps. At this point in time, for third parties and publishers in general, I feel like you should already know. The Switch has been out for 2 years. There have been countless of examples for almost every single major publisher except maybe Activision, because Activision really hasn't supported the Switch in any sort of significant way. But every publisher, Capcom included, has had their fair share of experiments on the Nintendo Switch, and I feel like you should probably already know by this point whether or not the Switch is viable for what games you have, and which ones are worth taking risks on and which ones aren't. And I don't think you should kind of outwardly say things, and maybe this was just a slip and, in a conversation saying, oh, I don't know, maybe if some other game sells well, then we can consider it. But I know that the sentiment that's saying like, hey, you have to do something, that us consumers, that us game players have to do something in order to make a port like this happen, it bothers me. I don't like seeing stuff like that. And that's everything I had for today's show. If you have any other comments, questions, thoughts, opinions, concerns, you want to reach out to me in any way, you can on the website, heartcontainerspodcast.com, or you can talk to me personally on my Twitter, where my handle is @RomeFawaz. That's ROMEFAWAZ. This has been Heart Containers for Monday, March 11th. I hope you guys get a good start of the week, and I hope you also join me tomorrow when we talk more about Nintendo news.